Hello and welcome back to Histories Tech, and today we are looking at the Bradley fighting vehicle. This vehicle has been the mainstay for the United States as an armored fighting vehicle since the 1980s, but it almost was never even created. It went through 20 years of development issues before we even got the version we have today. But let's go ahead and look at the family of vehicles known as the Bradley fighting vehicle. Now, a lot of people have actually heard of the issues that the Bradley went through during development thanks to the movie The Pentagon Wars made by HBO. And while it is a rather humorous comedy movie, it doesn't really tell the story of what really happened. Now, the whole reason for the development of the Bradley is basically because of the M113, which I have talked about. Please go watch my previous video about the M113. But basically, there was a need during the early stages of the Vietnam War to have a better armored, fighting-capable version of the M113. So in 1963, the Army began developing this IFV variant, the infantry fighting variant, and this became the basis for the XM734 prototype. This was basically just an M113, however, a 20mm autocannon had been added to it. And it was actually fielded in Vietnam from 1967 until 1972, where it actually had really positive feedback from troops. But this upgrade to the M113 was canceled due to a new joint venture between the United States and West Germany to develop a new main battle tank. And this vehicle, known as the MBT-7, was supposed to become a joint project to build a main battle tank for the United States and West Germany, along with a companion infantry fighting vehicle. And during this joint venture, the United States and Germany came up with the XM107. And this vehicle actually had a lot of amazing features in it. It had a 3-man crew, plus the ability to support 9 infantry that could fire out the sides of the vehicle. It had a built-in toilet and armor that was capable of resisting Soviet machine gun, and even an overpressure system to keep out biological and chemical agents. However, it was basically underpowered, had poor mobility, it couldn't keep up with the new MBT-7 that it was supposed to support, and it couldn't even be carried by the C-141 Starlifter. And due to severe budget cuts, they ended up just canceling the project. However, at this time, the Soviets released the BMP-1, and so there was a need for the United States to be able to keep up. And so they contacted FMC Corporation to build them a new IFV. So FMC went back to the 113 design and basically built an IFV variant, known as the XM765. But once again, it was not able to keep up with the new MBT-70, so the project was scrapped. So in 1972, FMC decided to present a new vehicle based on the LVTP-7 rather than the M113. This vehicle, the XM723 prototype, would actually be the basis for the vehicle we now know as the Bradley. And while they were developing this, there was actually a need for a scout reconnaissance vehicle, and they decided to go ahead and use this design and just make a modified version to fill this role, which would eventually become the basis for the M3 Bradley reconnaissance vehicle. Now, this variant actually had a 25mm cannon on it and a TOW missile launcher, which was actually relatively new. The TOW had just been seen in action for the first time in the 1973 Yom Kippur War and was seen to be a valuable asset as an anti-tank weapon. It was then decided that both weapons would become standard on both variants of the vehicle, and because of this, they were actually able to sell Congress on this vehicle and get it approved to move into the next phase of development. And this became known as the XM2 and XM3s. And this is the basis of the Bradley as we see it now, and it really does look like a modern-day Bradley. And as at this point, Congress actually orders 2 evaluations of this new IFV vehicle. And they have the General Accounting Office and the Department of the Army each give independent reports on this new vehicle. And the GAO basically hated the vehicle. They had issues with its height, its mobility, how complex it was, the lack of clear doctrinal usage for it, and the lack of any sort of protection against chemical, biological, or radiological elements. And it was almost killed right there on the spot. And the only thing that saved it is they were planning on going back to the M113, but to bring the M113 up to modernized standards, and mind you, this is about 1979 now, it was actually going to cost more money, and it wouldn't be that big of an improvement over the M2, M3 Bradley, and so they decided to go ahead and reauthorize it with some new improvements to make it a better vehicle. And so in 1981, full production begins of the Bradley, and it gets its name Bradley at that time, being named after World War II Army General Omar Bradley, who had actually died earlier in 1981. Now, the next issue for the Bradley came in 1984, when this man, Colonel James G. Burton, actually asked that the Department of Defense begin live fire testing on a fully loaded Bradley. And it actually wasn't just the Bradley he was advocating for this. He wanted this to happen with all vehicles at the time. He believed that the tests being done by Aberdeen Proving Grounds wasn't done in the normal way. It was actually a controlled test where they were picking specific spots to basically detonate charges on the vehicle to see if it would work or not. Instead, what Burton wanted was basically a whole bunch of random fire from a lot of different weapons, both NATO and Warsaw Pact weapons, especially Russian-made weapons. This actually led to a huge fight between him and the Aberdeen Proving Grounds and military brass, and he ended up basically resigning from the Air Force, and improvements were made to the Bradley as a result. And so by the time we enter into 1991, the Bradley is ready for its first real combat event, and that is going to be the first Gulf War. And the Bradley is actually going to have an amazing record in the first Gulf War. It actually is going to take out more Iraqi armored vehicles than the M1 Abrams, and even take out a few T-72 tanks. Sadly, another issue is going to happen with the Bradley at this time, and there's actually going to be 20 Bradleys lost during the Gulf War. 3 of them to enemy fire, 17 due to friendly fire incidents. So because of this, the Bradley is actually going to get these infrared identification panels attached to it, and they're actually going to add other markers and identifying features to the Bradley so that it cannot be killed anymore in a friendly fire incident. After this, it goes on to be a workhorse for the United States and a few other nations. By the mid-1990s, 5,500 Bradleys had been built, and eventually, by the end of its production run, 6,400 had been finished. Now, just like the M113, the Bradley actually has multiple variants. I'm going to hit a few of the big ones, such as the M3 Bradley Reconnaissance Vehicle. One of my favorites, the M6 Linebacker, which is an anti-air version. The tow missiles have been replaced with Stinger missile launchers. Another favorite of mine from my childhood, the M270 Multiple Launch Rocket System, which is arguably one of the most exported variants of the Bradley family. And one of the latest variants, the Armored Multipurpose Vehicle, kind of harks back to the old APC days by creating an unarmed variant of the M2 Bradley that is designed to carry more people, equipment over farther distances. Now, obviously, for a vehicle that's 40 years old, that's going to be time for a replacement. Interestingly enough, though, the Army has been trying to replace the Bradley since the mid-1980s. And there has actually been a multitude of projects designed to replace the Bradley. And they go everything from the Armored Systems Modernization Program to the Future Combat Systems, the Ground Combat Vehicle Program, the Next Generation Combat Vehicle Program, and currently we're in the Operationally Manned Fighting Vehicle Program. So for nearly as long as the Bradley has been out, they have been trying to replace it. Now, even with all of this, the likelihood of it being replaced anytime soon is not there. We're still using the M113, so the Bradley probably at least has another 30 or 40 years of good service in it. Yes, I am completely aware that some people probably want me to talk about its deployment in Ukraine by the Ukrainians. I will not go into the politics of it or anything like that. The Bradley is a very good vehicle. It just was not made for a straight tank to IFV battle. And it's going to do the best it possibly can in the hands of those who have it. But there you have it, a look at the Bradley fighting vehicle, the absolutely crazy issues that this vehicle had to go through for nearly 20 years to get it into the shape it is now. And for those of you wanting to know more about the MBT-70, I will be talking about it as I get ready to talk about the M1 Abrams coming up soon. But that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and we'll look forward to talking to you on the next time.